From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
It's been 5 months since our last exclusive Eyewitness News Roger Williams University poll. So what's changed?
Nothing has changed at all.
The two frontrunners on the governor's race are still neck and neck, separated by just 2 points, but both incumbent Governor Gina Raimondo and her leading Republican challenger, Alan Fung, are under 40% and still fending off energetic primary challengers. Chalk it up to summer doldrums, or are the candidates failing to excite the electorate? We break down our latest survey with a political roundtable this week on Newsmakers. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on this political roundtable, Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi, and from Roger Williams University, Ed Fitzpatrick. And we welcome back Joe Fleming, our Eyewitness News political analyst, and Lisa Pelosi. She was communications director for Governor Lincoln Almond. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the program. Good to have you. I'd like to go around the horn. To my right, Ted, we'll start with you. Your takeaways, 30 seconds or less, from the poll or the 2018 election season to date.
For me in the poll, it was what you said at the top of the show, Tim, which is just we are not seeing much movement in this poll from not only from our last poll, but if you stick to the two frontrunners, Gina Raimondo and Alan Fung, we're not even seeing much movement yet from the 2014 election results, which was Raimondo just under 41, Fung around 36. Now our poll has Raimondo around 39, Fung around 37. That's very little change. So I really wonder what that tells us about what the electorate thinks of these two pretty well-known figures.
And we're going to get into that. Ed?
I think this could be the third governor's race in a row where you have the winner not getting a majority. You know, in 2014 it was 41% for the winner. 2010 it was just 36%, and I think it does reflect a divided electorate. You know, we're more to the extremes these days.
Lincoln Chafee got 36%.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. Joe?
I think the big thing is how quiet the primary season has been, Tim. 4 years ago, both Democrat, Republican primaries, very active, a lot of activity among the candidates and the general public. This year, the general public doesn't seem to really care that much about the primaries, and there has not been a lot of action among the candidates.
What do you think, Lisa?
Well, you know, you started off by saying that there really hasn't been much movement, but when you really dig deep into this, and we've talked about how much money that the governor has been spending on commercials since she's been on the air in June, so June, July, right before, plus her press office tends to do a flurry of activity and grouping, and the week before this poll was taken, she had an event every single day, so she was in the news every single day in positive news, and it still didn't really move her numbers.
And for the record, I don't think they knew we were in the field at that time, so that wasn't intentional. But no, I get what you're saying, and I want to talk about, Nick, feel free to bring up the head-to-head matchup between Governor Gina Raimondo and Republican Alan Fung so we can see the slight separation there. And while we're working on that, Ted, answer Lisa's question. Did Governor Raimondo flush $1 million down the toilet?
Well, I think certainly, and you see there, I mean, 39 to 37, a 2-point race. Almost exact. I mean, once you take the margin of error in, it has not changed. You know, it's barely different, even those literal numbers from what we had in February. I think, you know, certainly my first reaction when we got the results from Joe was, wow, you know, where did that $1 million of TV spending go, as well as hundreds of thousands more she spent on other stuff. But I did have one interesting counterpoint made to me by a veteran in Rhode Island politics that at least I've been thinking about all week, which is he said, we're all assuming that the $1 million, that she would have been at 39% without the $1 million. He said, maybe she had to spend that much to hold on to the support she had in February.
You mean imagine how bad it could have been.
Yeah, you know, she could have fallen further. Now, we don't have a way to test that, but it's an interesting point to make, which is when we see her job approval rating relatively weak, around the same as her support, and her favorability only at 50 and a little under Alan Fung is at 56% favorable. Maybe she had to spend a bunch of money just to make sure she solidified support.
But I was going to say, what I think did happen with this money is she solidified herself among the Democrats. She has a 76.4% favorable rating among Democrats, 58% job approval rating among Democrats. She has a Democratic primary, so the money at least solidified her with the Democratic voters.
Go ahead.
I think it shows she's taken Brown's campaign seriously, and it might show also that both her and Fung have a ceiling, because with the poll show that you know, she just got up to 43.5% against the weakest Republican candidate, and Fung just got to 36% against the weakest Democrat.
That's an important point. Yeah.
Yes.
So Lisa and Nick, if you could bring up the independent voters graphic for us. Fung outperforms the governor here in our poll with independent voters. She holds a big, he holds a big advantage. Alan Fung, you can see there, again, this is independent voters in our poll, so it's a smaller sample than the 407 people that we surveyed, but that's 43% of independent voters, and Governor Raimondo got 25% there. 19% of independent voters aren't sure. Lisa, what's your takeaway on that one?
And actually, that was one of the things that really jumped out when I was going through all the tabs on this, is that the growing gap that is occurring between the governor and Mayor Fong in terms of independence. When I looked at the sample, and 43% of the sample is independents, when you look at registered voters in Rhode Island, the independent unaffiliated is the largest group of numbers. We Republicans know that we just rely on Republicans to vote for us. We don't win anything. So we know we need to get others. And to get the independents more on his side is boding very well for him as he moves forward.
Joe, does she have to get them all?
She does not have to get all the independents. The Democratic vote is about 39% of the state to start with, registered Democrats. She needs to get a portion of the independents, 35, 38% of the independents voters, to put her over the top. Right now, she's doing very well with Democrats. She's got like 66% of the Democratic vote against Alan Fung. So she needs to hold on to that, increase that a little bit, and grab like 30, 35% of the independents to win re-election. If Alan Fung can keep increasing his lead among independents, she could be in serious trouble.
Ted, do independents in Rhode Island, in another state, would they be a registered Republican? Do you think they skew a little conservative here?
I do tend to think that because for whatever reason in the culture in New England, there are fewer people who register as Republicans in this era. You have a lot of people who do lean more conservative, but for whatever reason don't want to put an R as their registration, but are leaning more sometimes a state more populist. They're frustrated, and in a state like Rhode Island where just about every office is held by Democrats, if you're frustrated with the government, even if they're not a Republican, they're probably going to be pretty anti-Democrat because the Democrats are running things and they're frustrated. But I think we also see how the level of frustration with independent voters, based on what happened with Bob Healy back in 2014, where we had polling results like this all through that election cycle, and then what happened in the end? All these undecideds really wound up going to Bob Healy, and Gina Raimondo and Alan Fung didn't really win it, many of the undecided voters.
So that was my takeaway if I were to join the Around the Horn on this. My takeaway on the poll is if you want to increase your name recognition, you should buy a yacht and run it aground. And Ed, to you, when we look at Joe Trillo, who is a longtime Republican in the state, he turned independent. His not sure number in our February poll was 67% February. Yeah, he went up 25% to 40. His
went up to 42%.
Unknown is 42%. So he was able to drop it down. So obviously you're with Roger Williams now, but you were a longtime reporter for the Providence Journal. Any publicity is good publicity in this case.
You get your name in the paper for good or for bad. You get your name recognition up. When he had a high percentage who didn't know what to make of him, didn't know he was running. So, maybe you should take that yacht out and run it aground during a water fire or something and get some of the Providence
voters. You might see it
voters.
going by your campus there.
Right by the campus.
Now, that said, I think it's important to point out that Joe Trillo is underwater with his favorable rating. So quite a few of those people who now have an impression of him have a bad impression.
Yeah. But he also was underwater last time. This time his favorable went up higher than his negative went up. So he is trending in the right direction. The big thing is what Joe Trillo has to do after the primary is put some meat on the bones. People may start to know the name because of the yacht and the sign, but they don't know much about him.
And how do you put meat on the bone?
Spending money. You have to spend money on paid media.
So this is push come to shove time for Joe Trillo.
Absolutely.
Because he's going to have to probably reach into his own pocket to spend that money.
After September 12th, I think he has to get on the air right away to become relevant in this race. You can't wait too long.
More importantly, he has to decide what role he wants to play in this campaign. Right now, the numbers are showing he does not have a path to victory in November. Right now, from February to now, it's just his numbers are not moving. So he's got to decide if his main goal, there's a main reason for running, is that he believes that Gina Raimondo should not be governor going forward. Then he either needs to step aside, or we will become a footnote in Rhode Island political history of the spoiler of this race.
But you got to keep this in mind. Back when Lincoln Chafee ran for governor as an independent in a three-way race, John Robitaille was the Republican candidate. Back early before the primary, he was at like 12, 13% as a Republican. He moved up at the end and almost won that race. So it can be done. But again, it takes money. It takes issues.
We have a couple of minutes before we have to go to break. Ed, I'm going to go back to you here. By this time in 2014, Ted and I had already moderated 2 pre-primary debates, and we already had scheduled 2 more pre-primary debates for both parties. In 2010, same story. It was a very busy summer for me moderating debates. This year, Alan Fung has flip-flopped on his pledge on this very show to debate his primary opponents on WPRI, and he's doing no other major television station. He's agreed to just one debate with John DePietro on WNRI in Woonsocket. And Governor Raimondo, too, has not committed to any pre-primary debates. Frustrating.
There's huge value in debates. I remember covering 14 and 10, and in 10, like, it seemed like there was a debate or a forum every other day. You know, I felt like I went around with those 4 candidates on a little tour, and you'd be at the Chamber of Commerce one day, you'd be at an environmental group the next day, a church in South Providence the next day, and you really got to see them move beyond their talking points and talk about specific issues, see if they could think on their feet. You really got to know who would make a good governor. And we're missing that this year, and I think it's too bad. I hope it happens because, you know, strategically there may be good reasons for them, the front runners, to stay out of debates, but for the voters it makes a lot of sense, and that's what's going to come first.
Let's talk about the strategy there. On the other side, Lisa, what are the campaigns? What is their view of a debate, especially for an incumbent?
So when you're a candidate, you're getting so many requests, and usually it's that between that September primary, November election. So you have just very limited days and you have. And as a candidate, you want to be out meeting people, shaking hands, talking to people, not having to sit in a room and be prepared for days for the environment issues, for the food and beverage issues, for the women's issues. So all of a sudden, beyond the televised debates, as in television and the radio and the print, it's all these special interest groups want all the candidates to come before and make sure that they're on their same page. If you're going to want our vote, you have to be on this issue with us. So it takes a lot of time. Right now, when you look at this, for Gina Raimondo and Alan Fung, not debating is not, right now they're the front runners. Why would they want to put themselves out there before September to do something that could be repeated over and over in the news cycle?
Yeah, so that's really the reason, Lisa. I mean, that's fine if they want to study the environmental thing and then all the time that takes. That's not why they're not doing this, right, Joe? I mean, they don't want to give oxygen to the other campaigns.
Absolutely agree. The other candidates running don't have the resources that these 2 candidates have. They don't have the money for a lot of paid media. You go on TV, you go on radio, you're giving the opponent a lot more press time they don't have. I also believe they don't want to get pushed too far to the left and too far to the right. I think we saw that 4 years ago in Alan Fung in the primary debates. I really believe it was pushed to the right in those debates. That hurt him in the general election. I think they believe that it's a calculated risk. If they don't debate, it may hurt them now a little bit. But come after the primary, we're going to debate. No one's going to remember us not debating before the primaries.
All right, I have to go to a break, but last thought here, Ted. Is Joe right there? Because one thing we're seeing, and as you're covering the campaigns, it's not only about debates, particularly with Alan Fung. Not only is he not doing a pre-primary debate on a major broadcast outlet, we're having difficulty tracking him down for an interview. We have to go to a campaign event if we can find one to ask him a question. Is he? Do you think it was sort of learning from 2014 for him, and he's just trying to get to the primary?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's a clear strategy by the Fung campaign is stay, kind of below ground, low profile through the primary. They think he was the nominee last time. He has higher name recognition in our poll among Republicans, independents, and the general electorate. He doesn't want to have to say something that might be played, as Lisa, over and over and over after the primary. And they don't think there's a high cost to, giving a lot of no comments on policy issues to reporters, refusing to do debates, not doing many interviews. I actually don't think Mayor Fung has had a campaign press event since he kicked off where a reporter could ask him a question. We found him the other day at a Little League event, but
right.
It's a different approach from the other candidates, and I think right now they think it's working. And I assume September 13th he'll want to be much more out there because he'll be in a much more competitive race based on our poll. But for the primary, this is the strategy they've taken, and if Republican primary voters are okay with the amount of information they have about Alan Fung, there's no real reason for them to change it.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, if the Paw Sox leave Rhode Island, what could that impact have on elections? Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. We're doing a political roundtable this week after our exclusive Eyewitness News Roger Williams University poll. And we have Ed Fitzpatrick from Roger Williams University, my colleague Ted Nesi, and 2 political analysts, Joe Fleming and Lisa Pelosi. Before we get into, as I teased, the big Paw Sox question, Ed, I just want to mention it's been great to work with Roger Williams on this poll, and credit to the late President Don Farish, who passed away last month. He was a real cheerleader on this.
Yeah, he would be very proud of this partnership and the value it's providing to Rhode Island. You know, it's very valuable data to have good hard numbers here in the middle of a campaign, and the interim president, Andy Workman, really sees this as a way to get involved in the real world, to support Rhode Island. So we're glad that this is happening.
And I can tell you, President Farish would not be happy about the lack of debates before the primary. I can say that with confidence, having met with him a few times over this. All right, we'll stick with you, though. Ed, I want to ask the Paw Sox question here. There's been some fatigue about the Paw Sox, but now there's this sort of realization that's settling on everyone. Geez, they could really leave. They could go to Worcester. There's obviously there's meetings with the Red Sox and Worcester. First of all, do you think they're going to leave Rhode Island?
Well, the Fitzpatricks have been fans of the Pawtucket Red Sox for
That's not the question,
decades. and back to the Pawtucket Slaters. My father grew up in Pawtucket, and I know Ted's grandfather played for the Slaters. So it'd be a shame to see them go, but I do think they're heading, because of the deal that was passed, I think they will go to Massachusetts, probably to Worcester.
All right, so what kind of impact would that have if they left before November? Would somebody take the blame for this?
Well, I have to say, I've waxed and waned on what the impact would be. You know, I cannot tell you how hostile the social media response about the Paw Sox has been, covering the legislative debates, the various proposals. As a reporter the last few years, I'll post a story, there's the latest plan, and you get this cascade of tweets and Facebook, let them go, this is terrible, don't give them a dime, this is corrupt, blah, blah, blah. So I said, oh, maybe there's this really strong opinion that, like, we don't want to give a dime to a stadium, I don't care if they leave. Now that we are, as you said, Tim, now that we're posting stories about, oh, they're touring Pawtucket, they're looking at Pawtucket.
At Worcester.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, thank you, Worcester. I'm starting to get reaction from people who say, how can wait, they might actually leave? Like, people maybe speaking up who just weren't saying anything because they figured, oh, it's always politics, but they're going to stay.
Right.
And so now I'm once again wondering, you know, I think of very different context, but in 1950, when China went communist, the big fight in American politics was who lost China? Was it Truman? Was it somebody? Who lost
Such a Ted Nesi analogy.
Who lost the Paw Sox being a big issue. And while the Republicans have been strongly opposed to any stadium deal, and I'm sure the governor's team will try to put it on them, she will be the governor who was unable to get a deal done and had them leave. And I could see that having some blowback on them. But again, A, I'm not convinced yet they're going to leave. I think it's still a live issue. And B, the public opinion on this has been so complex that I'm genuinely uncertain how it will play out.
Do you have any thoughts on this one, Lisa? You were in an administration that dealt with the Paw Sox under Lincoln Almond.
So the main players here have been the governor, the Senate president, and the speaker. And they all can do this. Right now,
like
don't blame me because, I did my part. So the three of them are going to do that. So then it gets translated down to the level of the voters and how they feel about it. But I guess the person I feel most sorry for is Mayor Grebian. He's been such a champion for, to try to keep them, in Pawtucket, to really make an economic development difference. But let me just correct, I'm not sure I would say all the Republicans were totally against the deal. I think it was the taxpayer funding part of it that there was the concern about it, but to have the Pawtucket Red Sox stay, but with a deal that did not include that level of taxpayer funding.
That's fair enough. I guess the team always made clear they weren't staying without a public. There was no deal without that, and the Republicans made clear, Brandon Bell, Steve Frias, and the campaigns, that was not on the table for them. And it left the Democrats pretty exposed. I think part of why Speaker Mattiello has been so opposed is because this is an issue in his race with Steve Frias, the Republican National Committee man in District 15. And so you saw Speaker Mattiello go from a strong supporter of the Providence Stadium in 2015 to by far the most skeptical member of the Democratic leadership at the State House on it. So the politics of this have been complex, and I think it's also the fact that the new ownership coming out of the gate in February 2015 and saying that first day, new people in the Paw Sox, and they're leaving Pawtucket right away, and we want a lot of money for it. It just torched their public support in the state, and I think we're still seeing the fallout from that.
Let's go from local to national. Joe, President Trump's job approval numbers, and Nick, why don't we bring up that graphic? They edged up slightly in this poll from our last one in February. He has a 37% excellent or good, as you can see there, 44% poor. So those are still very high.
Yes.
One number that stood out to me, 18% fair. You know, that's relatively low to the other ones. It seems to me people know how they feel about the job he's doing.
They definitely do. People are divided on Donald Trump, on either for him or against him. There's very few people in the middle with Donald Trump. We're seeing with the 18% here. The thing with this poll, I mean, he went up to 37% from 31% 5 months ago. However, he received about 38% of the vote when he ran for president in the state of Rhode Island. So he's only back to where he was before in the state of Rhode Island when he was elected. The thing that caused the movement was the independent voters. His vote among the independents was a lot better this time than it was 5 months ago, and that's why he moved up. And I have to believe a lot of that's because the economy has been so good the last 4 or 5 months. That's helped him with those voters. That number with Donald Trump can move up or it can move back down over the next few months.
Yeah, and I imagine it probably does fluctuate quite a bit. What kind of impact does this have on Joe Trillo? We have to remember Joe Trillo was the champion for Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign.
And I remember in the last poll we did, Joe Trillo said the biggest surprise was Donald Trump's low numbers. I think he believes this may help him some, but 37% still isn't a great number. And the question is, are those 37% going to go with Alan Fung or Patty Morgan, the Republican nominee, or will they go to Joe Trillo? He has to give them a reason to go to him. Up to this point, he has not done that. Just saying I was Donald Trump's chairman doesn't mean they're going to vote for you. You have to give them a reason to do that. They might be more inclined if they have a good reason.
I never underestimate how little the average voter remembers. There's a lot to keep track of in politics. They're not thinking about it every day like we are. People might not remember that Joe Trillo was, that the campaign was now 2 years ago.
Ted, so going back to Governor Raimondo and the money that she spent, and we talked about the matchup, the head-to-head with her and Alan Fung really hasn't changed. Her favorability numbers also haven't changed. Does that mean she's going to look at this? We don't know what her internal polling shows, but is she going to look at this and go, okay, maybe I'm going to pull back on spending right now? Do you think she's going to kind of go silent on the airwaves for a while?
I think just the opposite. I was looking at the FCC numbers on ad spending. The governor actually roughly doubled her television ad spending this past week on the local TV station. She was spending about $50,000 a week last week. This week she spent over $100,000 airing TV ads. So I think, you know, the other thing to remember is it's not just about do you have a TV ad on the air, it's do you have a good TV ad? Do people like it? You know, I've heard mixed commentary on the beer ad that she has. You know, that certainly got people talking, but I don't know.
Campaigns test these, don't they?
They do, but I have had campaigns tell me an ad tested great, and then I just never hear from someone who liked it, and I wonder about the tests they ran. But you're right, they're trying. But you know, you see their newest ad is a woman who says she was the victim of gun violence and is thanking the governor for signing the red flag law. This is now the second ad which you never hear Governor Raimondo's voice. You have a regular Rhode Islander, found by the campaign, but a regular citizen talking about something the governor did they liked, and then you see the governor with them at the end of it. I think that is an acknowledgement on their part that they're better off not pushing the governor herself out as much and putting out, here's something the governor did you might like, which we'll see if that strategy continues.
So I think, you know, in looking at how on the strategy behind her ads, that they've decided that they have to boost her likability rating. So every ad that she's done so far is making her look warm and fuzzy. And what we've noticed from the poll is that number didn't move. So what I'm very fearful for, and I think we all need to be prepared for starting September 13th until the election, is that as much as people hate negative ads, that it's going to be a blitz that you haven't seen before of those dark, black, menacing ads, one after another until November.
Her favorability numbers didn't move. Her job rating did move up 3 points in the survey, up to 40%. So that's a plus for her. But I totally agree with you. Come after September 12th, you're going to see independent expenditures coming to Rhode Island, spending big money on a lot of heavy negative ads to try to knock the governor down and to try to knock the Republican nominee down. You're going to see a lot. Right now gives her an opportunity to build herself up.
No, it's a great point, but Lisa, also because if you look at Alan Fung's numbers, Alan Fung saw a boost in his favorable rating. He's at 56% favorable, so he's viewed favorably by more voters than the governor, and she's only 2 points ahead of him. If she wants to keep that small edge and win, she has to keep Alan Fung down if he is the nominee. And as Lisa says, people don't like it, but negative ads are usually part of the, especially with the amount of money we're talking about.
And you know what is happening too, because I don't know like you, but I tape the news and then I fast forward. So I've been fast forwarding through her ads. But if you get
boss would not like to hear that.
There
goes our salary.
I know. But I think people, if there others who do the same, the dark and menacing ones, they'll stop and play over and over again.
Interesting.
That's
a great point. That the dark ones can be more interesting because
Yeah.
you're like, oh God, and
Yeah.
But how much can you change?
Sort of like a thumb stopper, Go ahead.
And Raimondo's got that big gap between her favorability and her job performance, so she does need to emphasize what she's doing as opposed to woman fuzzy.
Yeah,
Because
convert
it's
some of the
50%
favorable.
favorability, 40% for job
And
performance.
the other thing with the governor is how much are her numbers just very locked in, right? We saw no movement. We've seen all this money spent, and she's at 50% favorable, 40% job rating. You can throw a lot of negative ads at the governor as well, but will it shift people, or do they, will it just make the people who already don't like her not like her even more, and the other people dismiss it? And the question is Alan Fung also got a locked-in sense of things, or is there still room to shift because he's known too?
I think both of them are locked in at a certain point. But keep one thing with negative ads. Nobody likes them, but it does move voters. There's that 14% that are undecided. They go to move those 14 points. They need to move them to Fung or to Raimondo or to Joe Trillo picks them up.
Yeah.
Or one of the other candidates pick them up. But they have to move. The negative ads could move those voters.
Joe Fleming, Lisa Pelosi, Ed Fitzpatrick, Ted Nesi. It goes by quickly. Thank you very much for talking about this poll. We didn't even get to the issue questions, so if you want to look those up, they are all on our website, WPRI.com. Thanks again to Roger Williams University for the partnership. I will be off next week. You're in the capable hands of this guy, so join him on Newsmakers.